Hi, this is Steve back at the Listening Post after a nice holiday break. I hope everybody had a good Christmas and I hope their new year is off to a positive start. A while back, Neil and I were talking about artists that we might want to profile, and Nick Drake's name came up. Several of Neil's students had expressed an interest in learning more about Nick Drake, and I was kind of interested in him myself. I'd picked up his 3 albums in the used bins and had not actually listened to him yet, so I thought this would be a great opportunity to learn more about him. I knew the backstory, a troubled artist suffering from shyness and depression who never found success in his lifetime. Then 30 years after he died from a drug overdose, Volkswagen used one of his songs in a commercial, and suddenly everybody wanted to know who this guy was and learn more about him. I was a little hesitant to jump into his music, though, because knowing the backstory, I thought this guy might be a bit of a downer, but he couldn't be anything more opposite than a downer. I was very surprised at how cheerful and optimistic his melodies are, at least. I'm not big on lyrics. To me, the voice is just another instrument, and I'm more interested when I listen to music in the rhythm and the melody. And for this essay, I dug a little bit deeper into the lyrics. That he is a poet. He studied English literature at Cambridge University and uses a lot of metaphors having to do with nature and the passing of the seasons. He was influenced by Bob Dylan and Phil Ochs, and somewhat like Bob Dylan, his music can be a little bit ambiguous and open to interpretation. But I did not find him to be a downer at all. I found him to be somewhat wistful and reflective in his lyrics, and his music has a pastoral, somewhat meditative quality to it. And the guitar playing. He just picked up the instrument in 1965. He learned piano at an early age. He was encouraged by his parents, who were both musical, but he switched over to the guitar in 1965 after being influenced by the American and British folk movement at the time, and was signed to a contract in 1969. Actually 1968, when he was just 19, 20 years old, and very accomplished playing. He really came up to speed in a very short time. Nick Drake was born in 1948 in Rangoon, Burma. His father was an engineer with the Bombay Burma Trading Company, met his mother over there, and they married and then returned back to England in 1950. Nick Drake grew up in Warwickshire County in the West Midlands region of England. That's also the birthplace of William Shakespeare and George Eliot. He attended Marlborough College in 1962, played piano in the college orchestra. He was an accomplished athlete. He holds the school record for 100-yard dash. He was the captain of the school rugby team, and he was the head of house in C1, the college's largest house. In 1964, he formed a band called the Perfumed Gardeners that played R&B covers and jazz standards. 1965, he purchased his first guitar, taught himself how to play, experimented with finger picking and open tunings. One of the things that makes his guitar playing very unique is his use of what are called chord clusters, where you play notes that are in sequence. Easy to do on a piano, hard to do on a guitar if it's in a standard tuning, so he would experiment with the open tunings in order to use these chord clusters that he liked so much. In September 1969, Nick Drake enrolled in Cambridge University, studied English literature. He met a music student there named Robert Kirby. Robert Kirby recorded several of Nick Drake's compositions and then used those recordings to create string arrangements to accompany them. Nick Drake began playing in the coffee houses, and in February 1968 he was opening for Country Joe and the Fish, a San Francisco psychedelic rock band, when he was discovered by Ashley Hutchins, the bass player for Fairport Convention. He was signed to a contract by producer Joe Boyd. At this point, Nick Drake drops out of Cambridge with just 9 months left to his graduation, and he moves to London to pursue a career in music. In September 1969, his first album is released. It's called 5 Leaves Left. This is an interesting album. Joe Boyd has different people accompany Nick on each of the songs to create a little bit of a variety to the music. Richard Thompson of Fairport Convention plays guitar. Danny Thompson of Pentangle plays bass. And some of the highlights are Riverman, which is unique for its 5/4 time. Riverman may be a reference to the boatman on the river Styx who transfers the dead to purgatory. 5 Leaves Left, by the way, the name of the album is a reference to Rizla cigarettes. They would put a little note in each packet to let you know you were getting low. It said only 5 leaves left, and so that's where he got the name of the album. Some of the other songs on it, the opening track, Time Has Told Me, has kind of a honky-tonk country feel to it. The third track, 3 Hours, has sort of a Spanish flamenco guitar style. It's got bass and congas. Cello Song is accompanied by a cello, and there's a cello solo in the middle of the song. And the closing track, Saturday Sun, is a little bit jazzy in style and has a vibraphone on it. In October 1969, Nick Drake opens up for the Fairport Convention at the Royal Festival Hall in London. The concert and several others like it was not well received by the audience. Nick Drake was a shy young man and did not engage his audience real well, and he took a lot of time in between songs to change his tunings, which I guess put the audience off. You can get away with that if you've got a more engaging personality. I saw Tab Benoit, the blues guitarist from Louisiana, a couple years ago, and that guy's a really funny guy. He could have a second career as a stand-up comic, and he's just as entertaining in between songs as he is when he's playing. But Nick Drake did not have that gift for gab and soon withdrew from live performing because of that. In November 1970, he released his second album, Brighter Later. This is a play. Brighter Later is a play on English weathermen who would quite often report that the weather was cloudy now, but brighter later. And he changed the spelling, used a couple of Y's in it. This album has Richard Thompson again on guitar and 2 other members of Fairport Convention, Dave Pegg on bass and Dave Maddox on drums. It was the first album that Nick Drake allowed a bassist and a drummer to perform on each track, and it's more of a band album than the first album. It's also got John Cale of the Velvet Underground performing keyboards on one track. Some of the highlights include Poor Boy, which is kind of a jazzy tune. Reminds me a lot of the Mark Allman song The City, which didn't actually come out until 1971, but it's got a sax solo in the middle. Hazy Jane 2, Richard guitar on electric guitar and a horn section. Northern Sky, which features John Cale on piano, organ, and celesta. After this album came out, John Boyd sold his record company to Island Records, and he moved back to Los Angeles to work with Warner Brothers on film scores. So Nick Drake lost his mentor, and neither of his first 2 albums sold well. They both sold under 5,000 copies, and this led Nick Drake into a state of depression. His family persuaded him to visit a psychiatrist at St. Thomas Hospital who prescribed anti-depressants for him. Nick Drake was also heavily into drugs. He smoked a lot of pot, experimented with LSD, and John Cale evidently had a heroin habit, and there's some thought that Nick Drake might have even tried heroin at this time. This was the 60s, so a lot of that was going on, but not everybody could, handle it. Besides the well-known overdoses, there were a lot of guys like Skip Spence of Moby Grape and Danny Cobb of the Blues Project that were already a little unstable to begin with, and the drugs did them no good at all. And that very well may have been the case with Nick Drake. He began work on his third album in October of '71, Pink Moon. That was released in February 1972. This album is just Nick Drake on vocals and guitar, and he plays piano on the opening track. The cover art was actually painted by his sister's husband, Michael Trivey. In 1972, this album also did not sell well. Nick Drake was always very particular about the sequencing of the songs on his albums, and it's somewhat prophetic. The last two tracks, Harvest Breed and From the Morning, talk about basically being prepared for death. Harvest Breed talks about being ready to join the harvest breed, and From the Morning is more optimistic, talking about emerging out on the other side and a new beginning. And the album did not sell well, less than 5,000 copies again. 1972, Drake suffered a nervous breakdown, was hospitalized for 5 weeks. He really began withdrawing from society at this point. He did return in February 1974, and with his producer John Wood, recorded 3 more tracks, including Black-Eyed Dog, one of his more famous compositions. Black-Eyed Dog was a term Winston Churchill used to describe his bouts with depression. He returned to the studio one more time in July of '74 and recorded 2 more tracks, including Toe the Line, which was his very last recording. November 1974, he died from an overdose of his prescription antidepressants. He was just 26 years old. That would have been the end of the story. In 1979, Island Records released a retrospective called Fruit Tree, and that developed some interest in Nick Drake. In 1999, the song Pink Moon was used in a commercial by Volkswagen for their cabriolet, and that started leading to an increase in Nick Drake's record sales. In 2003, Rolling Stone magazine listed 5 Lease Left as the 280th greatest all-time album, and Pink Moon was ranked as the 320th all-time greatest album. In 2004, Made to Love Magic was released. This is an album containing tracks that he recorded at Cambridge in '68, and also the last 4 tracks that he recorded in 1974. This is a good 4th album to get a hold of. Everything's been nicely remastered, and it was put out by Robert Kirby, his friend and arranger from Cambridge, and John Wood, his engineer and producer. In 2010, AT&T used the song From the Morning in an advertisement as part of their Rethink Possible campaign. His music has been covered by several other artists. Millie, who did a song called My Boy Lollipop, covered the song Mayfair in 1970. In 1973, John Martin, another British folk musician who recorded with John Boyd, he dedicated the song Solid Air to Nick Drake. In 1976, Robert Smith formed a band called The Cure, and they were named for a lyric from the Nick Drake song Time Has Told Me. The lyric goes, "Time has told me you're a rare, rare find, a troubled cure for a troubled mind." 1985, Dream Academy dedicated the song Life in a Northern Town to Nick Drake. 1992, Lucinda Williams covered Which Will on her album Sweet Old World. 1992, a band called Drive covered a song called Road on their Out Freakage album. 1998, Brad Meldau, a jazz pianist, covered Riverman on his The Art of Trio Volume 3. And in 1999, the Swans covered Black-Eyed Dog on their Various Failures compilation. Black Eyed Dog was also used in the film Practical Magic in 1998, starring Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman. And in 2004, Zach Braff used the song One of These Things First in his film Garden State. Well, that's all I've got. I definitely encourage you to check Nick Drake out. He's not as bad as I thought he might be. He's actually quite uplifting, quite a good guitarist. Plays. It's kind of funny. He sings in kind of a whisper, but his guitar playing is very aggressive, and with the open tunings he uses, very unique in his style. Well, that's it. Like on all these videos, the essay is also up on the Totally Guitars website. You can read that, and thank you for listening. We will see you again next time.